The first time Marcus Cole saw her, he forgot how to tie his own tie. This is the story of how a single father's broken heart found its way back to beating again, and how the most powerful woman in corporate America discovered that sometimes the greatest strength is found in surrender. But here's what nobody expected. The secret she's been hiding could destroy everything they're building together. Stay with me, because what happens next will change how you think about love, second chances, and the courage it takes to let someone in. Marcus stood in the elevator of Cole Industries, his fingers fumbling with the silk fabric around his neck for the third time that morning. The Windsor knot he'd perfected over 15 years of corporate meetings had suddenly become an impossible puzzle. His reflection in the polished elevator door showed a man who looked put together on the outside, tailored charcoal suit, freshly shaved jaw, dark, hairstyled with just enough product to suggest effort without trying too hard. But his eyes told a different story. They carried the weight of sleepless nights, of bedtime stories read with manufactured enthusiasm, of parent-teacher conferences attended alone, of a 4-year-old daughter who still sometimes asked when mommy was coming home. The elevator dinged, announcing the 47th floor, the executive suite where today's merger meeting would determine the future of his family's company. The company his father had built from nothing, the company Marcus had sworn to protect, even as his personal life crumbled around him. He stepped out into the pristine corridor, still wrestling with his tie, when he collided with something soft and warm that smelled like jasmine and vanilla. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't." He began, looking up to meet the most striking pair of green eyes he'd ever seen. Evelyn Wright, CEO of Wright Enterprises, stood before him in a cream-colored Powers suit that somehow managed to look both authoritative and devastatingly feminine. Her long silky hair cascaded over her shoulders like spun gold, catching the fluorescent light in a way that made it shimmer. Her figure was the kind that turned heads in boardrooms and made men forget their prepared presentations. But it was her expression that stopped Marcus cold, a mixture of amusement and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" she asked, one perfectly shaped eyebrow arching upward. Marcus blinked, his brain finally catching up with the situation. Evelyn Wright, the woman who was about to acquire 40% of his company, the woman who had been described in Forbes as ruthlessly efficient and in the Wall Street Journal as the most formidable negotiator of her generation. The woman, who he now realized with mounting horror, he had just body-checked in the hallway while looking like he'd never learned to dress himself. "Miss Wright," he managed, extending his hand while his other continued its futile battle with his tie. "I'm Marcus Cole. I apologize for my daughter was having a rough morning and I stop," she said, and her voice carried the kind of quiet authority that made people actually stop. She stepped closer, so close that he could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose that her makeup couldn't quite conceal. "You're going to strangle yourself at this rate." Before he could protest, her hands were at his throat, her fingers deftly untangling the mess he'd made of the silk. She was close enough now that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, could see the way her lips pressed together in concentration as she worked. Those lips, perfectly shaped, touched with just a hint of color that made them look like rose petals in morning dew. "There," she said softly, smoothing the finished knot against his chest. But she didn't step back. Her hands lingered on his collar, and when she looked up, her green eyes were darker than they'd been moments before. "Stop staring at my lips like that. If you keep it up, I'll forget we're at work." The air between them crackled with something electric, something that had no place in a corporate corridor at 9 in the morning. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the years of carefully constructed walls threatening to crumble with a single touch from this woman he'd only just met. And then his phone rang, shattering the moment like glass against concrete. The screen showed his daughter's daycare, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not the merger, not the beautiful woman still standing too close for professional comfort, not the fact that his entire future hung in the balance. "I have to take this," he said, already stepping away, already feeling the familiar weight of single parenthood settling back onto his shoulders. "I'm sorry, I go," Evelyn said, and something in her expression shifted, softened in a way that surprised him. "I know that look. That's the look of a parent whose child needs them. The merger can wait 5 minutes." Marcus answered the call, his stomach dropping as the daycare administrator explained that Lily had fallen on the playground, that she was asking for her daddy, that she wasn't seriously hurt, but she was scared and crying and refusing to be comforted by anyone else. The same story that had played out a dozen times in the 2 years since Rachel had left. The same impossible choice between being there for his daughter and being there for his responsibilities. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, the impossible pressure of having to choose between the people and things you love, drop a comment below and let me know, because Marcus's story is just beginning, and what happens next will test everything he believes about love, sacrifice, and second chances. I have to go, Marcus said, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. My daughter, she needs me. Please tell the board I'll be there as soon as I can. I'll handle the board, Evelyn said, and her tone left no room for argument. Go be with your daughter. We'll reschedule. Marcus stared at her, waiting for the catch, the condition, the subtle reminder that in the corporate world, family emergencies were weaknesses to be exploited, but none came. Evelyn Wright, the woman they called the Ice Queen of Wall Street, simply nodded toward the elevator and turned away. He made it to the daycare in record time, his expensive shoes pounding against the sidewalk as he ran the last 2 blocks. Lily was sitting in the nurse's office, her small face streaked with tears, a rainbow bandage wrapped around her knee. The moment she saw him, she launched herself into his arms with a sob that broke something inside his chest. Daddy. She whimpered against his neck, her tiny fingers clutching his suit jacket like a lifeline. Daddy, I fell down and it hurt and I wanted you and you weren't there. I'm here now, baby girl. Marcus whispered, pressing kisses to her honey-colored hair, the same shade as her mother's before Rachel had walked out the door and never looked back. Daddy's here now. I've got you. He held her for a long time, letting her tears soak into his shirt, letting the world outside that small room fade into insignificance. This was what mattered. This tiny human being who depended on him for everything, who looked at him like he hung the moon and stars, who had no idea that sometimes her daddy felt like he was drowning in the weight of doing it all alone. When he finally looked up, his phone had 17 missed calls and 42 new emails. The merger meeting had been postponed indefinitely. His assistant had texted him 7 times in increasing states of panic, and there was one message from an unknown number that simply read, "Hope your daughter is okay." Marcus stared at that message for a long moment, something warm and unexpected blooming in his chest. In a world of corporate sharks and calculated moves, Evelyn Wright had done something genuinely kind. He saved her number without really thinking about why. The next few weeks passed in a blur of negotiations, conference calls, and the endless juggling act of single parenthood. Marcus saw Evelyn in meeting rooms and across boardroom tables. Always professional, always prepared, always devastating in her perfectly tailored suits and her razor-sharp intelligence. But sometimes when their eyes met across a crowded room, he caught glimpses of something else beneath her polished exterior, something that looked almost lonely. It was late on a Thursday night when everything changed. Marcus was still in his office, the city lights twinkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a cold cup of coffee beside him as he reviewed the final merger documents. Most of the building had emptied hours ago, but the weight of the deal kept him chained to his desk. A soft knock at his door made him look up. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her hair loose around her shoulders for the first time he could remember, her jacket discarded to reveal a simple silk blouse that made her look almost approachable, almost vulnerable. "Working late, Mr. Cole?" she asked, stepping into his office without waiting for an invitation. "Someone has to make sure you're not hiding any surprises in the fine print," he replied, leaning back in his chair with a tired smile. "What's your excuse?" "Maybe I just wanted to see if the rumors are true," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk with a grace that made the simple act look like choreography. "They say Marcus Cole never sleeps, that he haunts this building like a ghost in a $3,000 suit, only on nights when my daughter is at her grandmother's," Marcus said, and was surprised by the honesty in his own voice. "The apartment feels too quiet when she's not there, too." Something flickered across Evelyn's face, a shadow of understanding that spoke of her own lonely nights in her own too quiet spaces. "I know what you mean," she said softly. "I have a penthouse that could fit 50 people and most nights it's just me and whatever takeout I forgot to order." "The glamorous life of a CEO," Marcus said, but there was no mockery in his tone. "Not quite what the magazines make it look like, is it?" "No," she agreed, and for a moment, the armor she wore, like a second skin, seemed to fall away. "It's mostly just exhausting and lonely, and wondering if any of it actually matters in the end." They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment, the city humming below them, the weight of their respective empires pressing down on their shoulders. Marcus found himself studying her face, noticing the faint lines around her eyes that spoke of too many late nights, the way her fingers traced absent patterns on the arm of her chair. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer. Why, did you help me that day? When Lily got hurt and I had to leave the meeting, you didn't have to cover for me. Most people in your position would have used it as leverage." Evelyn was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, stripped of its usual corporate polish, raw in a way that made his breath catch. "Because I watched my father miss every important moment of my childhood for board meetings and quarterly reports," she said. "Because he died at his desk when I was 23 and his last words to his secretary were about the Beijing expansion. Because when I saw you choose your daughter over everything else, I saw the father I wished I'd had." If this story is touching your heart, if you see yourself in Marcus's struggle or Evelyn's hidden pain, share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to be vulnerable. Because the story is about to take a turn that none of us saw coming. Marcus reached across the desk without thinking, his fingers closing around hers in a gesture of comfort that felt as natural as breathing. She didn't pull away. Her skin was soft and warm, and when she looked at him, there were tears glistening in her eyes that she was trying desperately not to let fall. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "That must have been. It was a long time ago," she interrupted, but her fingers tightened around his ancient history. I never talk about this. I don't know why I'm telling you. Maybe because it's almost midnight and we're both still sitting in this God-forsaken building instead of living our actual lives," Marcus suggested. A hint of his usual humor creeping back into his voice. Maybe because misery loves company. Or maybe because you recognized a fellow workaholic and thought you'd found your people. Evelyn laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. "God, is that what we are? Workaholics Anonymous. Hi, I'm Marcus and I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. Hi, Marcus." She played along, a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm Evelyn and I once took a conference call from a spa in Bali because I couldn't handle being out of touch for 2 hours. That's impressively dysfunctional, I know. I'm very proud." They were both laughing now, the tension in the room shifting into something warmer, something that felt like the beginning of a friendship, or maybe something more. Marcus told himself he was imagining the way Evelyn's gaze kept drifting to his lips, the way she leaned slightly closer every time he spoke. "We should probably get out of here," he said, though the last thing he wanted was for this moment to end. "It's late. Even dedicated workaholics need to sleep occasionally. Or we could order terrible Chinese food from that place down the street and keep pretending we're working on these documents," Evelyn suggested, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Unless you have somewhere better to be." Marcus thought about his empty apartment, the silence that waited for him like a physical presence. He thought about the walls he'd built around his heart since Rachel left, the careful distance he maintained from anyone who might get close enough to hurt him. And then he thought about Evelyn's laugh, about the way she'd looked at him with understanding instead of pity, about the warmth of her fingers still intertwined with his terrible Chinese food. "Sounds perfect," he said. 3 weeks later, Marcus was beginning to suspect that he was in serious trouble. The merger negotiations had concluded successfully, making their companies partners in a venture that would reshape their industry. But somewhere along the way, the late-night document reviews had turned into dinner meetings, which had turned into coffee runs, which had turned into something that looked suspiciously like dating. "This is unprofessional," Evelyn said one evening, even as she leaned into him on his office couch, her head resting against his shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and amber. "We have a business relationship. This could complicate everything." "Probably," Marcus agreed, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Want me to stop?" "No," she admitted, and the single word carried the weight of surrender. "That's the problem. I don't want you to stop. I don't want any of this to stop. Then it won't," he said simply, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We're both adults. We can figure this out." But even as he said the words, Marcus felt the familiar fear coiling in his stomach. The last woman he'd loved had walked away without looking back, had left him and their daughter like they were nothing more than inconveniences to be discarded. What made him think this time would be different? As if reading his thoughts, Evelyn pulled back to look at him, her green eyes searching his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed in ways he hadn't experienced in years. "Tell me about her," she said. "Your ex-wife. You never talk about what happened." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, the old wounds opening with just the mention of Rachel. "There's not much to tell. She decided that being a mother wasn't what she wanted after all. She left. End of story." "That's not the whole story," Evelyn said gently. "That's not even the beginning of the story. I can see it in your eyes, Marcus. The way you flinch whenever anyone gets too close. The way you keep waiting for me to disappoint you. Maybe I'm just being realistic," he said, and the words came out sharper than he intended. "People leave. That's what they do. My mother left my father. Rachel left me. Everyone leaves eventually." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus braced himself for her to do exactly what he expected, to make excuses, to suddenly remember an early meeting, to begin the slow process of disentangling herself from his mess of a life. Instead, she took his face in her hands and kissed him. Not the tentative, testing kisses they'd shared before, but something fierce and claiming, something that felt like a declaration of war against all his carefully constructed defenses. "Listen to me," she said when she finally pulled back, her forehead resting against his. "I am not your mother. I am not Rachel. I am Evelyn, right, and I have spent my entire life running from anything that felt like vulnerability because I was terrified of ending up like my father. dying alone with nothing but regrets for company. But I am tired of running, I am tired of being alone. And I am telling you right here, right now, that I am not going anywhere. Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest, something that had been sealed shut for so long he'd forgotten it existed. You can't promise that, he whispered. No one can promise that. You're right, she agreed. I can't promise you forever. I can't promise that life won't throw us curveballs or that we won't have to fight for this. But I can promise you today, I can promise you that every morning I wake up, I will choose you, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. And isn't that what forever really is? Just a series of todays strung together, one after another. If you believe in the power of choosing love over fear, hit that like button right now. Because what Marcus says next will determine whether he can finally let go of his past and embrace the future standing right in front of him. My daughter, Marcus said, and his voice broke on the word. If you're going to be part of my life, she has to come first. Always, no matter what. I can't. I won't be with someone who makes me choose. Rachel made me choose every single day, and I can't. I would never ask you to choose, Evelyn interrupted, her eyes fierce with conviction. Marcus, the fact that you love that little girl the way you do is one of the reasons I fell for you in the first place. I want to know her. I want to be part of her life if you'll let me. I want God. I want things I never knew I wanted until I met you. Marcus pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had been shifting beneath his feet for years. She held him back just as tightly. And for the first time since Rachel walked out the door, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have this. He could have love. He could have a partner. He could have someone who chose him and Lily. Not in spite of each other, but because of each other. What neither of them knew was that 3 floors below, in an office that had been empty for months, a woman with honey-colored hair and a bitter smile was watching the security footage on her laptop. Rachel Cole had returned to claim what she'd thrown away, and she was prepared to burn down everything in her path to get it. 2 months had passed, and Marcus couldn't remember ever being this happy. Evelyn had become a fixture in his life, not just in the boardroom, but in the small, precious moments that made up an actual existence. She came to Sunday pancake breakfasts, sitting at his cluttered kitchen table, with flour in her perfectly styled hair and a smile on her face that made his heart stutter. She read bedtime stories to Lily in funny voices that made his daughter laugh until she cried. She held his hand in the dark when the nightmares came, the ones where he watched everyone he loved walk away. Daddy, is Miss Evelyn going to be my new mommy? Lily asked one morning, her small face serious as she stirred her cereal into a sugary paste. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. That's why do you ask, sweetheart? Because she does mommy things, Lily explained with the devastating logic of a 4-year-old. She makes my lunch with the crusts cut off, and she knows where my favorite blanket is. And she always remembers that I don't like it when my foods touch each other on the plate. And she looks at you like you're the best thing she's ever seen. That's what mommies do, right? Marcus set down his coffee cup and pulled his daughter into his lap, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and wondering how he'd gotten so lucky. Miss Evelyn cares about us very much, he said carefully. And I care about her. But becoming a family, that's a big decision. It takes time. How much time? Lily pressed. Because I already love her, Daddy. I want her to stay forever. Me too, baby girl, Marcus admitted, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Me too. That evening, he found himself standing in front of his grandmother's jewelry box, staring at the antique diamond ring that had been in his family for 4 generations. It had sat on his mother's finger until she walked away. It had never sat on Rachel's finger. She'd wanted something modern, something flashy, something that cost more than his first car. But when Marcus pictured this ring, he pictured it on Evelyn's elegant hand. He pictured her wearing it while she charmed investors and dominated boardrooms. He pictured her wearing it while she chased Lily around the living room, both of them breathless with laughter. He was going to ask her to marry him. The realization settled over him like a warm blanket, chasing away the last of the cold that had lived in his chest since Rachel left. He was going to ask Evelyn Wright to marry him, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't terrified of the answer. But when he arrived at Evelyn's apartment that night, flowers in one hand and a nervous flutter in his stomach, the door opened to reveal a woman who had clearly been crying. Evelyn's eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup smeared, her composure cracked in ways he'd never seen before. What happened? He demanded, pushing inside and taking her in his arms. Evelyn, talk to me. What's wrong? She handed him a manila envelope with trembling fingers. This was delivered to my office this afternoon. It's Marcus. You need to see what's inside. He opened the envelope with a growing sense of dread and his world collapsed around him. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, pictures of Evelyn at business meetings, at restaurants, at charity events. But she wasn't alone in any of them. A man stood beside her in every shot. A man Marcus had seen in the financial pages, a man who had been described as Evelyn's former fiancé. And then came the documents, bank records showing large transfers between Evelyn's accounts and shell companies, emails that taken out of context suggested that the merger between their companies had been designed from the start to strip Marcus of his assets. A detailed plan for what the attached letter called the Cole takedown. "This isn't what it looks like," Evelyn said, her voice desperate. "Marcus, I swear to you this is all fabricated. They're trying to destroy us. The photographs are old from before I ever met you. The emails are doctored. The bank records. How am I supposed to believe that?" Marcus heard himself say, and he barely recognized his own voice. Cold, distant, already retreating behind the walls he'd thought he'd torn down. "You're telling me that someone created this entire elaborate package of lies just to what? To make me doubt you?" "Yes." Evelyn grabbed his arms, forcing him to look at her. "Think about it. Who benefits from us falling apart? Who would want to destroy both of us personally and professionally?" Marcus wanted to believe her. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to trust her, to remember all the moments they'd shared, the vulnerability she'd shown him, the way she looked at Lily like his daughter was precious. But he'd trusted Rachel too. He'd believed Rachel's promises, Rachel's declarations of love, Rachel's vows, and Rachel had walked away without looking back, leaving him to pick up the pieces of a life she'd shattered. "I need time," he said, and watched Evelyn's face crumble. "I need to think. I need to figure out what's true." "Marcus, please, I'll call you tomorrow," he said, already moving toward the door, already feeling the cold seeping back into his bones. I can't do this right now. I'm sorry." He left her standing in the doorway of her penthouse, tears streaming down her face, and hated himself for every step that took him further away. What Marcus doesn't know, what he won't discover until it's almost too late, is that the person who orchestrated this attack is closer than he could ever imagine, and her next move will put everything he loves in danger. The truth came out 3 days later, but not in the way anyone expected. Marcus had spent those 3 days in a fog, going through the motions at work, coming home to a daughter who kept asking where Miss Evelyn was, lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling and feeling like his heart had been ripped out of his chest all over again. He'd hired investigators to verify the documents. He'd had his lawyers analyze every photograph, every email, every bank record, and piece by piece Evelyn's version of events had proven true. The photographs were years old. The emails had been expertly doctored. The bank records were elaborate forgeries. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to destroy his relationship with Evelyn. Someone who had access to her personal history, her business dealings, her former connections. Someone who had once shared a bed with Marcus himself. "Hello, darling," Rachel said, stepping out of the shadows of his office like she'd never left. She looked exactly the same, beautiful, polished, untouchable. The kind of woman who made other women feel inadequate and made men forget their own names. But all Marcus felt when he looked at her was cold rage. "What are you doing here, Rachel?" "Can a mother visit her daughter?" Rachel asked, her voice syrup-sweet. "It's been so long. I've missed her terribly. You walked out when she was 2 years old. You've never called, never written, never sent so much as a birthday card. You don't get to talk about missing her." "People change," Rachel said, settling into the chair across from his desk like she owned the place. "I've had time to think about my priorities. I realize I made a mistake leaving you and Lily. I want to come home." Marcus stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to reveal whatever game she was actually playing, because Rachel had never, in all the years he'd known her, done anything that didn't serve her own interests. "The photographs of Evelyn," he said flatly. "The fabricated emails, the forged documents. That was you, wasn't it?" Rachel's smile didn't waver. "I don't know what you're talking about, darling." "Don't," Marcus snapped, leaning forward in his chair. "Don't play games with me. I know it was you. The only thing I don't know is why." "Maybe because I couldn't stand watching you move on," Rachel said, and for a moment, something almost genuine flickered in her eyes. "Maybe because I realized what I threw away and I wanted it back." "You wanted it back," Marcus repeated, disbelief coloring his voice. "You destroyed my relationship. You tried to ruin the woman I love. You deliberately hurt me again after everything you already took from me. And you think that's going to make me want you back?" "I think," Rachel said, leaning forward with a predatory smile, "that you don't have a choice. I'm Lily's mother. I have rights. And unless you want this to get very ugly, very public, and very expensive, you're going to tell your little CEO girlfriend that it's over." The threat hung in the air between them, sharp as a knife. "Get out," Marcus said. "Think about it, darling. I'll give you until the end of the week to make the right decision." Rachel stood smoothing her skirt with manicured fingers. "Say hello to Lily for me." She was gone before he could respond, leaving nothing but the scent of her expensive perfume and the ruins of his peace. Marcus didn't call Evelyn that night. Instead, he called his lawyer, his mother, and finally his best friend from college who now ran the most aggressive family law firm on the East Coast. By morning, he had a plan. But first, he had an apology to make. He showed up at Evelyn's penthouse at 6:00 in the morning, carrying coffee, flowers, and the ring he'd been too afraid to offer before. She opened the door in a silk robe, her hair tangled from sleep, her face bare of makeup. She'd never looked more beautiful. "I'm an idiot," he said. "Yes," she agreed. But there was no anger in her voice, just exhaustion and something that looked like hope trying not to show itself. "You really are. I should have trusted you. I should have known that the woman who read bedtime stories to my daughter and learned how to make her favorite pancakes and held me when I woke up from nightmares about losing everyone I love. I should have known that woman would never betray me." "Yes," Evelyn said again, but now she was crying and so was he. "It was Rachel," he continued, stepping inside and pulling her into his arms. "She's back. She wants. I don't even know what she wants. Lily, me to hurt you, all of the above. But I swear to you, Evelyn, I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you if you'll let me. The rest of your life." Evelyn pulled back to look at him, her green eyes wide. "That's a pretty serious commitment, Cole. Good thing I came prepared," he said, and dropped to one knee right there in her foyer, pulling out the antique ring that had been waiting for the right finger. "Marcus, I know this is insane. I know we haven't been together that long. I know there's a hurricane coming with my ex-wife's name on it, and I know that every logical voice in your head is probably screaming at you to run. But I love you, Evelyn, right? I love the way you fix my ties and remember that Lily doesn't like her foods to touch. I love the way you challenge me and make me laugh and refuse to let me retreat behind my walls. I love every single thing about you, and I don't want to spend another day wondering what could have been. Marry me. Be my wife. Be Lily's mother. Be mine." "You're right," Evelyn whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This is insane." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes, you impossible man." "Of course it's a yes." The next few months were a battle on multiple fronts, but Marcus and Evelyn faced them together. Rachel's custody bid was exposed as the manipulative power play it truly was. When Marcus' lawyers uncovered her real motivation, a gambling debt to very dangerous people and a plan to ransom Lily's trust fund to pay it off, the revelation destroyed Rachel's case and her remaining credibility. She was facing criminal charges for the forgeries and the attempted fraud, and Lily, sweet Lily, never had to know how close she'd come to being used as a bargaining chip by the mother who'd abandoned her. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden of the house Marcus had bought for their growing family. Lily was the flower girl, scattering rose petals with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything she did. Marcus's mother was there along with Evelyn's small circle of genuine friends and the employees from both companies who had become like family over the years. But the moment Marcus would remember for the rest of his life was the moment Evelyn walked down the aisle toward him, her white dress simple and elegant, her long silky hair flowing behind her like a veil of gold, her green eyes fixed on his with a love so fierce it took his breath away. "You know," she whispered as she reached him, "the first time I fixed your tie, I thought you were just another corporate stiff in an expensive suit. And now," he asked, taking her hands in his, "now I know you're my corporate stiff in an expensive suit," she said, and kissed him before the officiant could tell her to wait. Their life together wasn't always easy. They had arguments about work and parenting, and whose turn it was to deal with the morning school run. Evelyn had to learn that love meant letting someone see you at your worst, not just your boardroom best. Marcus had to learn that not everyone who got close would eventually walk away, but every night they came home to each other. Every morning they woke up and chose each other again, just like Evelyn had promised that night in his office. And slowly, day by day, choice by choice, they built a forever out of a series of todays. 3 years later, Marcus stood in that same garden, watching Evelyn chase their twins, a boy and a girl 6 months old and already showing their mother's stubbornness around the yard, while Lily, now 7, directed the action like a tiny general. His heart was so full he thought it might burst. "Daddy," Lily called out, running toward him with her siblings toddling behind her. "Daddy, Mommy says, if you don't stop staring at her like that, she's gonna forget we're having a birthday party." Marcus laughed, scooping up all 3 of his children in a hug that left them shrieking with delight. Over their heads he caught Evelyn's eye. She was disheveled, exhausted, covered in grass stains and baby drool. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "I love you," he mouthed. "I know," she mouthed back, and her smile was everything he'd ever wanted. If you've made it to the end of this story, if you've laughed and cried and believed in the power of second chances, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Not because the algorithm demands it, but because every single one of you who engages with stories like this is helping to spread the message that love is worth fighting for, that families come in all forms, and that it's never too late to let someone into your heart. The truth is Marcus's story started with a broken tie and ended with a whole heart. It started with fear and ended with faith. It started with a single father who thought he'd never love again and ended with a man surrounded by a wife and children who reminded him every single day that the greatest risk in life isn't loving too much, it's never letting yourself love at all. So wherever you are right now, whatever walls you've built around your heart to protect yourself from being hurt, I want you to know something. You deserve love. You deserve to be chosen every single day by someone who sees all of you, the messy parts, the scared parts, the parts you try to hide, and loves you anyway. Don't be afraid to fix someone's tie. Don't be afraid to stay when every instinct tells you to run. Don't be afraid to say yes to insane proposals in your foyer at 600 in the morning, because sometimes the craziest leaps of faith are the ones that lead us exactly where we're meant to be. And now I have a question for all of you. Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world are you watching this from. I want to know how far and wide this story of love, courage, and second chances has traveled. From New York to Nigeria, from London to Lagos, from Sydney to Sao Paulo. Tell me where you are, because this community spans the entire globe, and every single one of you matters. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in love stories. And remember, the best chapter of your story might be just around the corner. Until next time.